Diane, what's happening?
Yes, good morning, Tanya. I would like to ask you, since we're talking about the asking price, I understand the commission based on the asking price. How about the account payable? If the seller and buyer, they agree with a number, do I get the commission on the account payable?
Well, it depends on your representation agreement. So, if you're using the CAB representation agreements, it basically says in there that your commission would be calculated on the total consideration, and then it clearly defines what consideration is, and consideration in the contract or in the CAB agreement is basically includes any cash, any kind of deferred or contingent compensation, any liabilities assumed by the buyer. So in that case, yes, if the buyer was assuming the accounts payable for whatever reason, if that's what they agreed to, then yes, that would be part of the consideration, and you would be paid a fee on that. As well as inventory, accounts receivable, all of that is part of the total consideration.
Oh, I see. The seller accusing that the account payable, it means she owns, so she think that she doesn't have to pay me for the account payable because she own people money. That not she earned the money.
Well, she doesn't. So if the buyer is assuming the payables, then it's part of the consideration. It gets added to the consideration. If the seller is retaining the payables and the seller is the one that's going to be paying them off, then that does not get added to the consideration, but nor does it get subtracted. So for example, let's say you're selling a business for $1 million and the seller has $400,000 of debt. So if the buyer is going to pay $1 million and take over the $400,000 in debt, then the total consideration is $1.4 million. But if the seller is going to keep the $400,000, then the consideration is only $1 million. But if the seller tries to say, "Hey, I have $400,000 in debt, so therefore I'm really only getting $600,000," that's not your problem. The fact that you sold the business for $1 million, you're going to get paid on $1 million. You're not going to the seller has no right to subtract their payables from the purchase price and say, "Hey, I'm only going to pay your fee on, whatever the difference is." Does that make sense?
You don't mind to say it one more time? The seller collect already $1 million, but the 400,000 she did not collect. The buyer paid directly to the vendor. She did not collect $400,000.
But if the buyer is paying off the debts to the vendor, the debts belong to the seller, then yes, that is additional consideration, and you should get compensated for that.
Thank you so much, Tanya. I understand now. Oh, for the next time, but this time she said no. But I appreciate
But your contract says otherwise. So, I mean, if you did use a CAB rep agreement, I would go back and just say, "Hey, look it, this is how my compensation is calculated, and according to the terms of the contract. And based on the terms of the contract, you owe me an additional X amount for, the $400,000 or whatever that amount was that was paid by the buyer to satisfy your debts as the seller."
Thank you so much. I got it now. Thank you.
Of course.